Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode, and Happy New Year. This is going to be my first episode recording in 2025, and I hope that we can jump right in and discuss some things. So, today I wanted to talk about immigration. With the start of the Trump administration off to a very controversial start, I figure I'd weigh in on this issue. And to preface, I'm not an abolish the state entirely libertarian, as I see the concept of the state being necessary, albeit to a limited degree, far more limited than what we currently have in the US now. And maybe one day I'll contrast my view of libertarianism with that of anarchism, but that's not the purpose of today's video. Now, there's a pervasive idea among many libertarians and anarcho-capitalists that advocates for an open borders policy once the welfare state is abolished and monetary incentives are removed that would enable people to freely travel and migrate where they please. And while this idea sounds good on paper, it fails to pass any logical scrutiny that would prove it actually works. And this is mostly because failed states, narco states, and states with inadequate harm reduction measures do exist, such as places like Venezuela, Mexico, Somalia, and the like. Because of this, sovereignty must exist, and states should have the right to that sovereignty. Borders are necessary to delineate between good ideas and bad ideas, as evidenced by the Cold War era East-West dichotomy, where you had the communists in the East and the capitalists in the West. And yes, I am saying communism is a bad idea. We draw lines on maps because some countries just have better ways of running than others. Does this mean America is perfect? Far from it. But our foundation is based on the pursuit of a more perfect union with the respecting of the rights of the individual and placing their rights in higher priority than that of the mob, or the majority. This is why the founders spoke out frequently against a pure democracy, and why the phrase tyranny of the majority is often associated with purely democratic rule. So where does immigration come into all of this? Well, as a state exercises its sovereignty, it has to maintain the right to discriminate on who it allows in and how. This is accomplished through laws. A country would collapse very quickly if just anyone were allowed in and given the opportunity to draw from a system that they contribute very little to, which is a major criticism of the welfare state, but I won't get into that can of worms today. This isn't to say non-citizens are bad people or that persons who immigrate illegally have ill intent. But there is a need to have a system to vet those people to ensure we're not just importing another country's problem children and malcontents. With the rampant cultural differences between many countries in the US, it makes sense to ensure that people who come here don't just completely erase the shared national identity and replace it with one of their own. That just leads to changing the nation they now reside in to more closely mirror the one they came from. In that case, what's the point of leaving where you come from if you're just changing your new home to that of your old one? On a smaller scale, this is what we see happening all the time within our own country. People will leave one state with terrible policies and move to a new state just to vote for the exact same policies as those of where they came from, and it makes no logical sense. The other issue stemming from all this is assimilation. No one is saying that immigrants have to completely abandon their previous culture in order to move to a new location. But they should be willing to adopt some of the customs, rules, and traditions, and not to mention language, of the place they wish to emigrate to. Otherwise, why would they go there? And how would they expect to thrive? It's immoral and disrespectful to move to a new location and demand the longtime residents there bend to your will instead of adapting to their way of life. And this is why an immigration policy is necessary. Now, we can have the conversation about reforms to current immigration policy and discuss that, making it less burdensome on immigrants, like shortening the time period it takes and reducing the cost. But until that happens, we still do need to respect the policies in place that enable people who want to come here the right way have a chance to do so. Illegal immigration harms that process as it is viewed as people cutting in line in front of those who went about paying in time, money, and effort to abide by the laws. Allowing these people to remain while others who did it correctly is a slap in the face to everyone who proved that they can abide by the laws in place. And this is where animosity and distrust has been festering, as many times there are instances where illegal immigrants come here and not only refuse to assimilate or adopt the language of the country, but also have an unrealistic expectation that they are owed something by the receiving nation. Essentially, you do not have a right to just go wherever you want without following some sort of system in order to get there if its established rules dictate so. Another issue stemming from the immigration problem is the labor issue. It's one that many don't acknowledge on the left, but it does need to be said. A lot of people clamor that illegal immigrants contribute and pay taxes. This is true, but only to a small extent. It is illegal to employ those who do not have permission to live and work here, but it still happens, and the motivation behind it is inexpensive labor, as labor laws only apply to those citizens who are on the books in the workforce. And therefore, illegal labor is not subject to things like minimum wage laws, and also labor laws. But that's another topic for another time, I guess. Therefore, illegal migrant workers are paid substantially less than that of legal citizens and save the employer money despite them breaking the law. So a lot of these employers see the risk versus reward and decide that hiring illegal workers and saving money is worth the risk. As many times, it's because enforcement is so lax. But what this actually does in certain industries is suppress them to the point where there no longer exists an incentive to hire citizen workers in that field, and therefore it becomes dominated by illegal workers. And when something like a hardline immigration administration comes in and begins increasing deportation efforts, that industry becomes devoid of a workforce because of the suppressed wages, leading to a sharp decline in productivity in an industry that that basically suffered a reduced workforce. And it presents a catch-22 that easily could have been avoided. Then this has negative economic impacts, as now the products and services those industries once produced at a much lower cost have to increase prices in order to offset the increased wage demands due to citizen workers being the only pool from which to draw labor. What is not stated about this fact, though, is that paying these illegal workers a reduced wage is essentially a form of slavery and creates a moral hypocrisy among those on the left who advocate for all workers to have a living wage, but say nothing about the opposition to deporting those who were denied that to begin with. The common theme is, without migrant workers, who would pick the crops? This is basically them stating that they're okay with people not making a living wage just as long as they're not from here. Even if it's not their intention, that's exactly what they're saying. The other unfortunate truth behind the illegal migrant workforce is that many of them do not contribute to society nearly as much or in as meaningful of a way as many would like to believe. A lot of these illegal communities have established these islands where their communities can coexist, among themselves in a micro ecosystem and economic system. They don't pay taxes on their income and thus have found ways to not pay taxes on goods and services provided within these microeconomic islands in which they reside. They buy things and employ each other without going through the legally established channels, and therefore are really not contributing back into the greater society. It's also a huge thing for many of these migrant workers to send a portion of their earnings back to their family in their country of origin, thereby removing currency from this country and exporting it back to their own. Essentially, this could be classified as a form of theft and further depreciates that nation's currency while also artificially causing inflation to their own country. Hardly a moral or ethical concept to support, if you were to ask me. And really, this lack of foundational kind of melding into the culture, as well as refusal to adopt the new language, has led to things like press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish on a lot of phone trees and things of that nature, which does create an undue burden in the American economy. Furthermore, it also creates a secondary subsect for a dual language kind of purpose within like educational systems or employment circles. And while people will argue there is no official language of the United States, if you were to look at the laws, the foundational documents, and the common languages spoken among leadership in this nation, it goes without saying that English is the official language of the United States of America, and therefore refusal to learn that language and refusal to assimilate within that culture becomes kind of a point of contention within all of this. So in conclusion, I think a modicum of discernment is necessary to maintain sovereignty in a nation, and that deportation is a necessary act that a nation dealing with illegal immigration must enforce. It shouldn't be done unethically, or maliciously, but also opponents should consider that there are logistical concerns that do need to be accounted for, so a little grace is requested in that. I do not see how being in support of enforcing the sovereign rights of a state are in any way counter to libertarian ideology, just as expelling those who have entered your home illegally is not unethical or immoral. And this was kind of a short one I wanted to do today, but I think I got my point across. And I thank you all for tuning in, and I'll catch you all on the next one.